sugar, spice, and everything nice. And what's this? No, it can't be, but it is. Discount Professor Utonium. Go ahead and just look at him real quick. Accidentally cracked open a can of whoop-ass into the mix, thus creating the 1992 Powerpuff Girls. Yes, this was the original ingredient behind the powers of Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. Not no dang pansy chemical X nonsense. And with all of this, a short film known as Whoop-Ass Stew, A Sticky Situation was created. The origins for what would become the Powerpuff Girls. This was a film created by Craig McCracken and friends at his time during, yes, you've guessed it, the great and wonderful California Institute of the Arts, or Cal Arts as it's better known, where every animator from the United States who has ever made anything ever, or anything good, seems to have attended at some point. Whoop-Ass Stew would be a second-year student film created with the idea in mind to make 4 more films under this title. The title was sort of a pun based upon the book Wombat Stew. I don't know if anybody knows it. It's a story about a wombat and a dingo. The funny thing about all this was that Craig would miss class so often that when it came to actually turn in this film to be graded, they were kind of like, you know, who are you in a sense? Though he still got a highly passing grade in the long run, and, you know, that kind of makes sense. You know, imagine giving an F to a cartoon that would become one of the biggest ever created. I mean, that would be ridiculous. I mean, not that anybody knew, but still, come on. Anyways, the film itself, which featured a goofy version of Professor Utonium, the Powerpuff Girls, who were all voiced by one actress at the same time, kind of sounding like a fused Go-Tanks, the Amoeba Boys, and even a bit of the Gangrene Gang. They were all pretty darn spot on for the time too, and the girls were actually kind of brutal in this. They seemed to pretty much have killed the Amiibo Boys by tossing them into the sun, or so it would appear. Crazy because Craig apparently said that he had all these characters already thought of and drawn before any of this, even Mojo Jojo. He just never knew how to use them or where to use them. Side note. The Powerpuff Girls designs were said to have been inspired by Margaret Keane in those big-eyed drawings, those kind of creepy ones, you know what I'm saying? Saying that his version was sort of like a cute Sanrio-esque adoption to this, but I'm not really sure. I mean, it could really damn well be a false quote. So, you know, take that with a grain of sugar, if you will. Now, the influence behind creating this for Craig was actually the 1960s Batman starring Adam West. Pretty neat, huh? You know, like those little run cycles that they did, that's what he kind of wanted. Also, to create something, you know, sort of against the norm, instead of a big muscular man whooping some ass, why not these powerful young girls? And send a positive message saying that, hey, sometimes it's okay to punch somebody in the face just a little. That was really sort of the inspiration behind it and was the starting point. Okay, maybe not really the whole punching in the face thing. Anyways, the show did have a great balance between rainbows, unicorns, and violence, though. Now think about it. This really donned a new aesthetic, didn't it? Boy, those goths sure did grow to love their rainbows and violence, didn't they? Now, let's fast forward a little bit, shall we? To the year 1993, right after college. Craig was hired by Hanna-Barbera, which, if you don't know, is a studio that supplies a good majority of cartoons for Cartoon Network throughout all their years. So Craig was working as an art director at the time, and then he decided to pitch his own show to the network. Yes, that show being Whoop-Ass Stew, same title, same concept, same everything. And this was after hearing about What a Cartoon, which I have mentioned before. It's just a bunch of cartoon shorts shared by Hanna-Barbera to Cartoon Network in hopes of something getting picked up full time. The crazy thing was, while in development, this show, with the name Whoop-Ass Stew and all, actually stuck for a while, even surprising Craig. Though eventually it was obvious a name change would come due to the nature of the younger audience who would be watching. It did stick for a little while though. Anyways, now he was looking for a new name for the show, and he couldn't think of anything. Eventually, his friends would help change it to the Powerpuff Girls not long after. And yes, they were also known as the Whoop-Ass Girls at the time prior to all this as well. The show was just called Whoop-Ass Stew. Another wild thing was that one of the original pilots, known as Meat Fuzzy Lumpkins, was actually met with a negative reaction at first. Apparently, it had been shown to a focus group of 11-year-old boy audience who clearly showed their dislike for the show, stating that whoever made it should be fired, which was a total kick in the stomach for Craig, and he really had to rethink the whole thing. Thus, Powerpuff Girls wouldn't get picked up at the time. This was also the same pilot shown during the What a Cartoon, just as it was shown with the focus group. Still, nothing came of it, so either way, it wasn't working. However, all hope was not lost, because another show that would end up being picked up, known as Dexter's Laboratory, the first What a Cartoon short that was actually picked up, a show made by Gendy Tartakovsky, a friend and former classmate of Craig, also a damn legend. Anyways, Craig was working as one of the storyboard artists for Dexter's Lab at the time after he failed his pitch, and his work on the show would not go unnoticed, specifically by Linda Saminsky, an animation executive at Cartoon Network at the time, who helped convince Mike Lazo, the executive of programming, to give Craig another chance. Funnily enough, it was actually Mike that reassured Craig after the whole focus group incident thing, stating that he shouldn't change his ideas just because of one bad focus group, that his idea was actually good, it just needed to be fixed up slightly. Thus, leading Craig to get back to work on a pitch Bible and redraft the show just a little bit to fit the audience, as this seemed to be the problem in the first place. Maybe the humor was just a bit too sophisticated, he thought, because fast forward to another focus group that was held during the height of the show, and just how it was done in the past with a similar audience, only this time it was clear that everyone in attendance actually watched the show and loved it. So clearly the elements changed, worked well. Okay, too far ahead of myself, back to the pitch Bible, which, for those of you who don't know, is basically a heavily detailed outline of the show's ideas, from characters to plots. Luckily, this worked out well in Craig's case, as it was very well received and led to the Powerpuff Girls being greenlit for 13 episodes, which made it the 4th show produced from What a Cartoon. For reference, Powerpuff Girls wouldn't premiere until November 18th, 1998, and the show's short was first premiered during What a Cartoon on February 20th, 1995. Wow, that was 29 years ago exactly. That's actually wild. Anyhow, this time around it received nothing but positive reviews and was even called the perfect show by LA Weekly. I guess times were a-changin', and people came around to the idea of these newly found superheroes, which is great, because that show kicked ass. Whooped ass. Anyways, that's the simple origin for the Powerpuff Girls. I'm glad it all worked out. Speaking of which, I gotta get back to work too. Bye-bye.